Welcome to the NCS Tech Talks podcast, your hub for all things tech and innovation. Get ready to discover the upcoming technologies shaping the future of businesses.
Talking about AI, right? Now, AI is, and I think you alluded earlier, pretty data hungry, data intensive, and also computationally intensive too, right? Therefore contributing, I guess, quite a bit of carbon emissions. What's your thoughts about how to leverage AI properly? Because AI can also have transformative impact as well, right? On business processes, making it a lot more optimized and efficient. Right. So on the one hand, AI consumes a lot of energy, but on the other hand, it can help to optimize the utilization of energy. What have you seen companies out there done to sort of strike the right balance?
This is actually going to be really interesting. Like, I was thinking about some of the big trends for 2024, because obviously as a technology vendor, we're trying to sort of think a little bit ahead about what's actually going, and AI is unavoidable, right? It is one of those workloads which certainly promises a lot of benefits in terms of the way we actually engage with customers, identify new business opportunities, a whole range of different things. Your point about AI being very environmentally intensive is very valid. The environmental aspect of AI will be very interesting to go ahead and actually watch, right? Right now, that's dominated by companies like NVIDIA and what they can go ahead and actually do from a processing point of view. But we're certainly seeing initiatives from organizations like AMD also stepping into the range to be able to look at what they're offering. I think what we're going to see is probably a overconsumption of AI workloads to get people who are going to go ahead and actually see, okay, where's the value that we can go ahead and actually generate? To be honest, right? I mean, everyone's going to want to do AI projects. And the big challenge is they're probably going to do them somewhat inefficiently, or at least they'll be thinking about the outcome before they think about the actual impact of the process. It's not just AI. I mean, how many workloads do you remember over the last 20 years where you kind of went ahead and said, well, if we run this application, what's the impact on the environment? We probably never even asked that question, to be honest, right? To your point, AI is well known to actually be very, very resource intensive. And I think as the visibility of environmental sustainability in the data centers come up, people are now starting to say, hey, how is these AI workloads going to actually be? I think it's probably going to be a lot of consumption. People are probably going to try and actually do it without necessarily thinking about the environmental impact. I think there's an opportunity for customers to be cognizant and aware of what they're doing. And it'll probably necessitate tools to be able to give them visibility. Like, I would love for us to be able to see tools that were akin to what we saw probably around about 5 or 6, maybe even 10 years ago. If you remember, we had the concept of chargeback. People were going ahead and building out infrastructure. Based on the utilization of that infrastructure, you could go to a department inside your organization and say, hey, you consume this much of resources, we're going to go ahead and actually bill you. Some people call it chargeback, some people call it showback, things like that. I believe that same approach or that same initiative should start to be applied to environmental sustainability as well. Here's the applications that your department's actually going ahead and consuming. This is the impact on the environment they're going to go ahead and actually have. The promise is that AI, or at least some form of data analytics, will enable us to start looking at what those AI workloads actually are and maybe identify ways to optimize.
What I've seen in the generative AI space, which is evolving very quickly, is that there's sort of two-track development, right? One is that we're seeing models that are becoming larger and larger. When you have billions of parameters going on, trillions of parameters, inevitably the kind of energy consumption that you have, right, goes up. Imagine the number of GPUs used to go and train someone, billions of parameters. But those models are obviously very powerful, right, in performing general tasks. The second sort of development track that we're seeing is that, more and more sort of task-specific but smaller models. And these will not perform as well in tasks outside the specific task, right? But the upside here is that, they are much smaller, right? Hence, from an environment sustainability standpoint, they will have a lower carbon footprint.
You make a point about the large learning models and then large language models, and then some of the smaller ones. And part of it is the training, right? I mean, that's really where your energy consumption goes up. That's where your greenhouse gas emissions, the heat and all those different things is really going to be impacted because of the actual training itself. Is there some sort of benefit for a customer to kind of time or schedule when training actually goes on. Right now, today, do people go ahead and actually train when they want to train? Probably they do, right? I hit the button, training starts, and I don't think anything more of it. But if you were to say, okay, I'm going to do training or commit our infrastructure to training after hours, kind of like in the past where we've sort of gone ahead and done batch processing, we do it after hours. Maybe we need to think about doing training of AI in different times. Like if at nighttime the temperature goes down a bit more, then maybe I don't have to cool the data center so much to be able to go ahead and actually do the training, right? I mean, it comes down to what is the optimal time to be able to go ahead and actually do that training from an environmental standpoint. We're still at that sort of excitement time. Like, I want to get the AI done. I want to quickly go ahead and actually build a project. I want to show value quickly so people don't think I'm wasting time with something that's not important. And we don't necessarily think about what is the right time to go ahead and actually do it. But maybe that is an angle as well that we can actually say, when is the right time to go ahead and actually train the AI, especially if you're doing the ones that are more on-prem. Like, it might be a bit more challenging to sort of say when's the right time to do it if you're sort of running general AI models on the cloud. But if you do have a focus of actually doing something more private AI, is there a responsibility where you say, what is the right time to go ahead and actually train those models, regardless of whether they're large language models or small ones?
Yeah, I guess a lot of these sort of greener software practices, I'll call it a practice of, a lot of that will depend on how well we are able to measure it. Any thoughts on how we can go about doing measurement better to yield more transparency across our supply chain, utilizing energy, contributing to carbon emissions through our various business processes?
Yes, and almost no. There is a yes to, I mean, there's different initiatives coming across different areas of technology, right? So is there one measure across every single aspect? Like, you talk about the supply chain, you talk about every solution has lots of different things. Like if you talk about an IT solution, at the very, very base, you're probably thinking about the data center itself. You've got then the power, then the networking, then the storage and the compute and everything in between. From a consistency point of view, it's a little bit challenging. But one of the ones which I find interesting is in terms of the procurement and life cycle of products, and then also the operational aspect of those products. I'll talk about the execution, because then it kind of leads into aspects of certification, things like that. There's an industry association called SNIA, or the Storage and Networking Industry Association. And they've been working on this for a long time. They've come up with a measure of energy efficiency, which is basically IOPS per watt. The higher IOPS per watt you actually have, the more energy efficient your storage, because they're from the Storage and Networking Industry Association, typically has. It has a much larger, complicated name, very scientific, but basically we're talking IOPS per watt. And what I really get excited about is that a lot of vendors in the industry are now starting to publish this. Like, they're using this as an industry point of data, which you can rely upon to say, hey, this is our level of energy efficiency. And it's not so much that you have to physically go ahead and actually ask a vendor and say, hey, tell me what your IOPS per watt is on your particular storage array or product. They've started to go ahead and actually publish this. And so Energy Star is an organization most people probably have heard of, and probably have seen it 100 times. They've probably seen it on their label on monitors and things like that. But never really sort of gone into more detail. Based out of the US, which actually logs all of these different products. And it's not just IT products, but it's products like washing machines, fridges, a whole range of different things. And they have adopted the SNIA measure of IOPS per watt in the product. So if you go to the Energy Star website, you can actually look at the Energy Star certification and compare all of the different data center storage technologies and have a look at what is the actual IOPS per watt. So it is now helping customers have a much greater level of visibility in terms of the energy efficiency of their data center technologies, which leads to good educated decisions. But that's not the entire environmental sustainability story. Like, you've got to look at the full life cycle of a product, right? So how do you think about the supply chain? Right? The actual starting point where you do raw material acquisition and design and all those different things, to manufacture, to shipment, to operation, to recycling and all those different things. That's the entire environmental life cycle you need to think about from a technology. One of the things which I am very, very proud to sort of say for Hitachi Vantara, particularly because we come from Japan, is we also subscribe to the certification called CFP, or Carbon Footprint of Products. Now, the Japanese government, they have actually made sure that products in Japan, they make sure that not only do they demonstrate the entire life cycle of greenhouse gas emissions from that raw material acquisition to production to operation to retirement, they also have that independently third-party audited. So it's not just you submit and they publish, it's independently audited, and you can go to the website and literally see the actual person who independently audited the numbers and the life cycle and all of those different things. So that additional level of scrutiny encourages us to quite often think about the entire life cycle of our products. And so we've looked at this and we can sort of show that it's anywhere from around about, I think it's like 35 to 40% reduced greenhouse gas emissions compared to other products in the same industry, because of our commitment to the Japanese CFP certification. Like, we have to make sure that we really look at every ounce of the supply chain to optimize our products for environmental sustainability.
Just curious, was this a top-down initiative from the regulator, or there was a bottom-up sort of a movement by the industry players recognizing that, we talked about earlier, the complementarities between environment sustainability and economic competitiveness?
I think it's both ways. It starts with, the research bodies going ahead and saying, hey, like, this is a problem. We need to go ahead and actually do something about it. And, the government bodies get behind it and they start sort of saying, like, how do we start to think about, enforcing this to do the right thing? But the good thing is that companies have also, especially larger companies, and we've been one of those companies who have always been actively engaged in environmental sustainability issues, participating in forums like COP, for example, which is a worldwide forum, and trying to make sure that we drive visibility about what needs to be done from a supply chain point of view. So, those sorts of bodies and those sorts of grassroots level movements get support from the actual organizations behind it, but they're also then, getting sort of pushed into making sure that the government is seeing that certain level of credibility. So I think it comes in two directions with the effort to go ahead and actually do the right thing.
Now, one of the things that we like to do in this podcast series is to do a bit of crystal balling, right? Now, Matthew, both of you and I are based in Singapore. So my question is really, what are some of the future trends in sustainable AI you like to see, and you're seeing or anticipating in Singapore and our surrounding region?
Yeah, actually, there's a really interesting article in the newspaper in the Straits Times. They were talking about some of the studies that were being done in terms of environmental sustainability. It wasn't necessarily about just AI, but about what was actually being done and how organizations like the PUB was actually getting ready for things like that, right? One of the things which struck me was some of the comments that we were talking about from a design of Singapore, the design of the buildings and the design of some of the environments we actually work in. And I really think that AI probably has an opportunity to be able to provide some level of insights around that and start to look at, okay, well, how do we start to utilize our environments a little bit more intelligently? Or how do we actually place things in certain locations to be able to drive for a better level of sustainability? How do you think about design that has a positive impact on the cooling of a city? And I think AI has an opportunity to be able to go ahead and actually do that. We've certainly seen AI do some pretty incredible things around design already. And I'm not necessarily talking about Midjourney or image design or things like that, but with the right information and the right sort of insights, there's probably things that AI can observe that's been done that has the potential to be able to make recommendations to building developers and a whole range of different things. I think as we start to look at building developments, AI probably has an opportunity to look at it and say, okay, well, what are we doing from a sustainable materials point of view, and how do we design certain buildings and things like that? In Singapore, we do have significant constraints on space. we live inside a kind of a box. And I don't want to use that as a negative sort of term. Like, quite often you hear people saying we need to think outside the box. Sure, I get that. I love that terminology. But sometimes I also like to have the terminology of thinking inside the box. And that sometimes forces us to think a little bit differently to be able to solve within the constraints we have. And I think Singapore has some interesting constraints. So I think AI has an opportunity to understand of the constraints we actually have inside Singapore and start to look at how we actually make recommendations around architecture and building design and those sorts of things to be able to promote a more sustainable environment. The other thing that I would actually imagine that AI could be really, really beneficial from a sustainability point of view is also going to be around traffic management. Is there a way that AI might be able to give you better insights as to how you manage traffic a little bit better? I find it fascinating to see some of the new entry of vendors into the marketplace who are building more sustainable vehicles, or at least electric powered vehicles. Maybe AI can actually help with how do you design the grid to be able to go ahead and actually charge those vehicles, and how do you make that accessible to people? Those are some of the things I kind of think about. It really comes back to how does AI apply to better design Singapore with environmental sustainability in mind?
Great answer. I think for us at NCS, that answer really resonates a lot because we are active sort of participants in many of the national digital sort of projects and systems. And we do see that, going forward, there will be a lot more sort of leveraging, smarter sort of data management to drive some of these intelligent AI systems. We are almost at the end of this episode, right? So Matthew, any final thoughts and takeaways for the CXOs and the board directors that are listening in?
You know what? I would sort of leave you with the thought that environmental sustainability is not easy, right? If it was easy, we would have fixed it by now. I think the best thing to do is to try and take a start. And we'd like to all be bold and start big and solve big problems straight away. But I think, as you sort of called out, Xiaowei, it is a lot of mindset change as well. And just understanding what you have and starting to look for the functional tweaks you can go ahead and actually do. Those are going to be the ways you can go ahead and actually start. If there's one place I would sort of say, combining another industry term, which you've probably heard about, have a look for your technical debt in the organization. Look for the things which probably have been sitting there for a long time, hidden in the corner. Really ask yourselves the questions. Do we really need this today? Is this really going to have an impact for us? Or can we really look for opportunities to go ahead and retire that with an aim to lowering our carbon footprint, right? It takes a bit of time, takes some cataloging. Sometimes we have to make tough calls, but those are the calls if we together as an industry, as the world can start to do, we will have a tangible impact. So yeah, no better time to get started than today.
Terrific, Matthew, to cover a very wide range of topics related to IT and sustainability. I'd like to express my appreciation for your time and your sharing. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in to Tech Thoughts. Be sure to hit the subscribe button on our podcast channel so you never miss out on the latest and greatest insights from industry leaders and experts. We look forward to welcoming you back for our next episode. Till then, stay inspired and keep innovating.